The story of Ukraine is a tragic story in which the United States led Ukraine on for U.S. purposes for many, many years and got Ukraine into terrible trouble. I think President Trump is trying to end the war now, which could save Ukraine. But this is after a long period of U.S.-led disasters. The main disaster started with the U.S. push for NATO to enlarge to Ukraine right up to Russia's border. And Russia has been saying for 30 years, keep away from our border. We don't want American military bases on our border. We don't want American missiles minutes away from Moscow. All perfectly understandable. But the United States was so arrogant for so long that it didn't listen. In 2008, the United States pushed NATO to commit to enlarge to Ukraine and to Georgia in the South Caucasus. And this was viewed by Russia as very dangerous, unambiguously so. Now, in 2014, the United States participated in a coup that overthrew a Ukrainian president who favored neutrality. And the government that came in after the coup was a pro-NATO enlargement government. When two of the ethnic Russian regions of eastern Ukraine broke away from the coup, there was negotiated a Minsk agreement, actually Minsk I and Minsk II. Minsk II was endorsed unanimously by the UN Security Council to give autonomy to the ethnic Russian regions of eastern Ukraine. But the United States said to the post-coup government in Ukraine, you don't have to accept that. You should remain a unitary state, and notwithstanding the UN Security Council support for the Minsk II agreement, don't give autonomy. This was another terrible mistake. In the end of 2021, President Putin proposed a new security agreement with the United States, starting with no NATO enlargement to Ukraine. The United States refused to negotiate on that basis. When Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th, 2022, the Ukrainian government, Mr. Zelensky, immediately said, almost within days, yes, we can be neutral. And on that basis, what's called the Istanbul process, a draft peace agreement was reached on April 15th, 2022. Once again, the United States said to the Ukrainians, you don't have to accept that. You shouldn't accept that. You should fight on. We have your back. So too did the British. And Ukraine walked away from the negotiating table and continued the war. There have been about 1 million casualties on the Ukrainian side since then, dead and seriously wounded. And of course, the battle has not gone well for the Ukrainians. They have lost ground significantly since those early days when they could have had a peace. So all of this is to say, at every step of the way, the United States has given the wrong advice. And it led into this war that never should have happened. Now there needs to be peace. It was very unpleasant to watch because the United States led Ukraine into this trap. And so the ultimate responsibility is American responsibility. But Donald Trump does not want Biden's losing hand. This is the basic point. Remember how Trump kept talking to Zelensky, you have a losing hand, you have a losing hand. In fact, Trump is holding the cards that Biden was playing, if you could put it that way. And the Biden administration was an incompetent administration. It did great damage to Ukraine and I think to American interests and to world interests. And Trump does not want to hold those losing cards. This is the basic point, to use that extended analogy. It was crude. It was nasty. It did not reflect the reality that the U.S. was the underlying cause. But I have to say, Zelensky does not represent Ukraine's interests right now. He rules by martial law. The majority of the people in Ukraine want peace, even with territorial concessions. The young people of Ukraine do not want to die needlessly on the front line, which is what's happening right now. They're being pulled off the streets and sent with insufficient training, leadership, and weaponry to the front line where they're dying. They don't want that. And Zelensky is not the voice of his nation. He is a martial law ruler. So this is a terrible situation. Again, the United States pushed Ukraine into this. I used to say for years in warning to the Ukrainians, I said, you will become the Afghanistan of Europe. Be careful. I used to quote to them the famous adage of Henry Kissinger, that to be an enemy of the United States is dangerous, but to be a friend is fatal. And that's what I told them. Well, they want a peace. They don't want a ceasefire per se. They want a peace agreement. And as I keep emphasizing, the Istanbul draft peace agreement of April 15, 2022 is a perfectly sensible basis for peace. The longer Ukraine holds out, the more territory Ukraine will lose. If they continue to hold out and refuse to negotiate, they'll lose the whole country, in effect. Russia, I believe, will just continue to advance. Peace is in Ukraine's interest. It has been in Ukraine's interest all along. The Ukraine government should not have said they want to join NATO. It was too dangerous. The Ukraine government should have implemented the Minsk agreement. The Ukraine government should have signed the Istanbul draft peace agreement. So these are terrible mistakes, all of them made under the guidance and the reassurance by the United States, which is no guidance of wisdom and no true reassurance at all. I believe that what makes the agreement work is when an agreement is reached. If President Putin were to brazenly violate it, those who are guarantors of the agreement and those who are friendly with Russia would, of course, recoil. And so the mistake in our public discourse is to say, how can we trust Putin? Well, this is what the West says. I know, by the way, how many times the U.S. cheats, so I'm not impressed by that line anyway. But on the question, how does one trust a country to abide by a treaty? It's not a bilateral agreement between Ukraine and Russia. Such an agreement would be a globally understood agreement, such that if one party violated it, it would lead to high costs for the violator because all of the trade partners, the finance partners, the diplomatic partners of that country would recoil. Russia has good relations with India. Russia has good relations with China. But if Russia and Ukraine signed a peace agreement and then Russia just broke the agreement willfully, that would definitely harm relations with India and with China and with others. So that's why I believe treaties make a difference, because it comes at a high cost to violate them. I do believe the right place for a treaty like this starts in the UN Security Council. I might add, I also believe that India should be a permanent member of the UN Security Council. That's a matter for another discussion. But I would like to see India as a permanent member, as the sixth permanent member of the UN Security Council, because of India's place in the world as one of the world's most important countries. I do. I regard there as being four great powers in the world right now. The United States, Russia, China, and India. These are four massive economies, four nuclear powers, four technologically sophisticated countries. These are the four great powers of the world. If Europe ever got its act together, it would be a fifth right now. Europe is represented in the Security Council, of course. India, in my view, should have a permanent seat. My own view is that this is feasible. The main blockage is China, but China and India are both part of the BRICS. They are both believers in multilateralism. I personally, again, speaking as a completely independent observer, I don't much like the Quad or the idea of the U.S. and India somehow ganging up on China. I don't think that this is good for the world or good for India. I would like China and India to have normal relations and for China to say, yes, you're even bigger, more populous than we are, which is amazing. And yes, we support you for a seat in the UN Security Council. If that happened, if China said, yes, we have good relations with India, we have mutually respectful relations, we have solved our tensions on the border issues, we are engaged in trade, we are co-making the BRICS and so forth. And yes, we support India as the sixth permanent member. It would happen almost immediately. And this is at least what I believe should happen. To my mind, India's seat in the UN Security Council on a permanent basis is very important and positive for the world.